The city lights of Chicago bled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting streaks of gold across the marble floors of a life Clara once thought was perfect. That was before the letter, before the silence. For Ethan Hayes, a self-made millionaire, the silence was the most terrifying thing he'd ever known. His pregnant wife, Clara, had vanished. She didn't take his money or his cars. She took the future he'd carelessly broken. He thought his ambition was his greatest strength, but it had blinded him to the rot spreading through the foundations of his marriage. Now, consumed by a guilt that gnawed deeper than any business failure, his desperate search for Clara becomes a search for his own soul. He has to find her, not just to beg for forgiveness, but to meet the child who represents his greatest betrayal and his only hope for redemption. The test stick lay on the cool white marble of the vanity, a tiny scepter ruling over a new kingdom of possibility. 2 pink lines. Not faint, not ambiguous, but a bold, declarative statement. You are here. Clara Hayes pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, a tremor running through her. For 3 years, this was the ghost in their penthouse apartment, the empty nursery, the monthly cycle of hope and quiet disappointment, the subtle strain it placed on her marriage to Ethan. They had everything else. The sprawling view of Lake Michigan, the hushed elegance of bespoke furniture, the kind of wealth that insulated them from the world's harsh edges. But this tiny life no bigger than a poppy seed, was the one luxury they couldn't seem to acquire. Until now, a giddy, breathless laugh escaped her lips. She had to tell him. But how? A simple announcement felt insufficient for a miracle. This deserved a moment. A memory carved out of time. She imagined it all. A candlelit dinner, his favorite ribeye steak, the bottle of vintage Bordeaux he'd been saving. She would let the evening unfold, let the familiar rhythm of their life lull them into comfort. And then, she'd slide a small, elegantly wrapped box across the table. Inside, a pair of tiny knitted baby booties. His reaction would be the real gift, the surprise in his sharp gray eyes, the slow dawning smile that transformed his usually severe face, the way he would pull her into his arms, his ambition and drive momentarily forgotten for the pure, simple joy of family. Ethan was a man built of ambition. He'd clawed his way up from nothing. His real estate development firm, Hayes Corp., now sculpting the Chicago skyline. She admired his fire, the relentless energy that had first drawn her to him. But lately, that fire seemed to consume everything in its path, leaving her in the cool shadows. Late nights became all-nighters. Business trips bled into weekends. He was physically present less and less, and even when he was, his mind was often elsewhere, lost in blueprints and zoning laws. But this, she thought, clutching the test to her chest, this would change everything. A baby would be their anchor, their true north. It would bring him home. Humming with a joy so potent it felt like electricity, she began to prepare. She called their private butcher, ordered the finest cut of beef. She pulled out the good china, the crystal glasses that chimed with the promise of celebration. As she worked, she felt a lightness she hadn't realized was missing, the heavy cloak of inadequacy lifting from her shoulders. She was no longer just the beautiful, supportive wife of Ethan Hayes. She was a mother. It was while she was searching for the silver napkin rings in his office bureau, a place she rarely entered, that the first crack appeared in her perfect day. Tucked in the back of a drawer, beneath a stack of old tax returns, was a credit card statement she didn't recognize. It was a secondary card linked to his main account, one he must have opened for business expenses. Her eyes scanned the list of charges: lavish dinners at restaurants she'd never heard of, Ubers across town at 2 a.m., and one charge that made her breath catch: the Elysian Hotel. A boutique, notoriously discreet hotel in a trendy, artsy neighborhood, a charge for one night 2 weeks ago. On a Tuesday, he was supposedly working late to close the Peterson deal. A cold knot formed in her stomach, pushing aside the warmth of her earlier joy. It's nothing, she told herself. A business meeting that ran late, a client he had to put up for the night. There were 100 logical explanations. Ethan was a man of grand gestures. Of course, he'd use the best hotel. She tried to shake it off, stuffing the statement back into the drawer and closing it with a definitive click. But the seed of doubt had been planted. It was a tiny, insidious thing, and it followed her back into the gleaming, sterile kitchen. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A message from their shared family cloud account, notifying her of a new file upload from Ethan's laptop. Usually it was building plans or contracts. She tapped the notification out of habit. A new folder had appeared. It was titled Project Lyra. Lyra. The constellation. It was a name they had talked about years ago, on their honeymoon in Santorini. If we ever have a daughter, he'd whispered, his arm around her as they stared at the star-dusted sky. Let's name her Lyra. Her heart hammered against her ribs. With a trembling finger, she opened the folder. It wasn't blueprints. It was photos, dozens of them. The first was of a woman she vaguely recognized. Isabel, a junior architect from his firm. Young, with vibrant auburn hair and a laugh that seemed to fill the frame. She was standing on a balcony, the city lights blurred behind her, wearing Ethan's cashmere coat. The next photo was of them together, their heads bent over a cocktail, their smiles intimate and easy. Then another, and another. On a boat on the lake, his arms slung possessively around her waist. At a gallery opening Clara had been too tired to attend. In a sun-drenched cafe, Isabel's hand resting on his. Clara's world began to tilt on its axis. The air grew thin. She scrolled faster, a desperate self-destructive urge propelling her forward. There were photos from the company retreat in Napa, the one he insisted she not come to because it would be all business. In one shot, he was fastening a necklace around Isabel's neck, a delicate silver chain with a tiny diamond-studded constellation. Lyra. The final file wasn't a photo. It was a video. Her finger hovered over the thumbnail before pressing down. The sound of a hotel room came through her phone's speaker. Faint music. The clink of glasses. Ethan's voice, low and husky. "For my rising star," he was saying. Isabel's face, flushed with adoration, turned to the camera he was holding. "Ethan, it's beautiful. I love it." He didn't reply with words. He just leaned in and kissed her, a long, tender kiss that was achingly familiar. The phone slipped from Clara's numb fingers and clattered onto the marble floor. The steak was still on the counter. The wine was breathing. The candles were waiting to be lit. The entire scene was a monument to a future that had just been obliterated. The joy from an hour ago was a cruel phantom, a ghost of a life she now realized she'd been living alone. The baby. Her hand flew to her stomach, no longer in wonder, but in a fierce, protective clench. He had given their daughter's name, their daughter's gift, to another woman. The betrayal wasn't just against her. It was against this innocent, unborn child. She couldn't bring a baby into this house, this beautiful, perfect gilded cage built on a throne of lies. She looked around the vast living room, at the art she had so carefully chosen, the books she had read, the life she had curated. It all felt alien. It wasn't hers. It was a set piece in the grand play of Ethan Hayes' success. Clarity, cold and sharp, cut through the shock. She couldn't confront him. What was the point? He would lie. He would apologize. He would promise to change. He would use his power and his charisma to smooth it all over, to make her feel like she was the one who was overreacting. And maybe, in a moment of weakness, she would believe him. For the baby's sake. No. The baby and she deserved more than a fractured life held together by flimsy promises. She walked into their master bedroom, the closet the size of a small boutique. She ignored the designer dresses and expensive shoes. She pulled out a small worn duffel bag from the back, one she used for the gym in a life before Ethan. She packed methodically, not with the panic of flight, but with the chilling resolve of a soldier preparing for a new, unknown war. Practical clothes. A few treasured books. Her mother's locket. She went to the safe and took out the emergency cash they kept, $20,000. A pittance to him, but a lifeline to her. She logged into their joint bank account and transferred another $30,000 into her old, rarely used personal account under her maiden name, Clara Vance. Enough to disappear. Enough to start over. Finally, she sat at his heavy mahogany desk, the seat of his power. She took a single sheet of his thick, embossed stationery. Her hand was steady as she wrote. She didn't fill it with accusations or rage. That was his language. Loud, dramatic, overpowering. She would use hers. Quiet, devastating, final. Ethan. I found the folder. Project Lyra. The baby and I deserved better. Don't look for us. She didn't sign her name. She didn't need to. She placed the note in the center of his desk, on top of his keyboard. Then she walked to the nightstand on her side of the bed, picked up her smartphone and powered it down for the last time. She left it there, next to her wedding ring and the positive pregnancy test. She took one last look at the Chicago skyline, a glittering tapestry of ambition and deceit. Then, pulling the hood of her jacket over her head, Clara Hayes walked out of the penthouse, leaving the door unlocked. She didn't look back. She dissolved into the anonymity of the city, a ghost leaving a haunted house, carrying her only precious thing with her. Ethan Hayes walked into his apartment just after 10 p.m., loosening the knot of his silk tie. The exhaustion was bone deep. The Peterson deal had finally closed, a multi-hundred-million-dollar behemoth that would cement Hayes Corp's dominance for the next decade. He should have been celebrating, but all he felt was a hollow ache. He'd been chasing this high for months, and now that it was here, it felt like nothing. "Clara?" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "I'm home." Silence. The apartment was dark, except for the cool glow of the city. Strange. By now, she would usually be curled up on the sofa with a book, waiting for him. A flicker of irritation went through him. He'd texted her he was on his way, that he had big news. He switched on the lights, revealing the immaculate, sterile perfection of their home. Then he saw it. The table was set for a feast. 2 places. The best china. His favorite wine decanting on the sideboard. A pang of guilt hit him. She had planned something special, and he was 3 hours late. He'd gotten caught up in drinks with the Peterson team, his phone silenced in his pocket. "Clara?" he called again, walking through the living room. "Honey, I'm so sorry I'm late. We closed the deal." Still nothing. He checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. An unease began to creep up his spine. This wasn't like her. Clara was the steady beat in the chaotic rhythm of his life. She was always there. He walked into his office, ready to drop his briefcase, and that's when he saw the single sheet of paper on his keyboard. His brow furrowed. He picked it up. "Ethan, I found the folder. Project Lyra. The baby and I deserved better. Don't look for us." The words didn't compute at first. They were just letters on a page. Project Lyra. A cold dread, icy and immediate, seized him. His affair. Isabel. The secret folder on the cloud he'd so arrogantly assumed was invisible. Then the second part of the letter slammed into him with the force of a physical blow. The baby and I. Baby? He stumbled back, his hand hitting the desk for support. He read the words again. And again. The baby. Clara was pregnant. He was going to be a father. A tidal wave of euphoria crashed over him, so pure and powerful it almost brought him to his knees. For a split second, it was the only thing that mattered. Then the context returned, and the joy curdled into horror. She was pregnant, and she was gone. Because of him. Because of Isabel. Because of a stupid, reckless, selfish affair he had told himself meant nothing. No, he whispered, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. No, no, no. He sprinted back into the bedroom, his heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm against his ribs. He saw it then, her phone on the nightstand. Next to it, her brilliant 3-carat diamond ring, catching the light like a mocking star. And beside the ring, the object that confirmed his new reality. The positive pregnancy test. He picked it up, his hand shaking violently. It was real. All of it. The miracle he and Clara had prayed for had arrived, and he had squandered it in the most spectacular, destructive way imaginable. The weight of his betrayal, of his colossal stupidity, crushed him. He wasn't just a cheating husband anymore. He was a man who had driven his pregnant wife out into the night. He grabbed his own phone, his fingers fumbling as he dialed her number. It rang once before clicking to voicemail. Of course. Her phone was right there. He called her mother, her sister, her best friend Maya. Each call was a fresh spike of panic. No one had heard from her. No one knew anything. He slumped to the floor, the plush carpet offering no comfort. The penthouse, once a symbol of his success, suddenly felt like a tomb. Every beautiful object was an indictment. Every window showed a city full of millions of people, one of whom was the only person who mattered, and he had no idea where she was. The silence she had left behind was deafening. It was the sound of his world ending. The first week was a blur of caffeine-fueled panic and frantic, useless action. Ethan hired the best private investigator money could buy, a grizzled ex-cop named Fleming who listened to the story with impassive eyes. She left her phone, her cards, her car? Fleming asked, his voice a low gravel. She doesn't want to be found, Mr. Hayes. That's the hardest kind of find. Ethan didn't care. Money is no object, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. What good was his fortune now? His days became a ritual of torment. He'd wake up on the sofa, having been unable to sleep in their bed, and the reality would hit him anew. He'd check his email 100 times, praying for a message. He'd call Fleming 3 times a day for updates that never came. Clara had been smart. She had used cash. She had vanished from the grid. He went to his office, but he couldn't focus. He stared at blueprints of gleaming towers, but all he could see was the ghost of her face. His business partner Marcus tried to intervene. Ethan, you need to pull it together, Marcus said, standing in the doorway of Ethan's glass-walled office. The board is getting nervous. You look like hell. Clara's gone, Marcus, Ethan said, his voice raw. Marcus sighed, running a hand over his tired face. I know, and I'm sorry, man. I truly am. But you have responsibilities here. Did you know? Ethan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. He looked up, his gray eyes dark with suspicion. About Isabel. Did you know? Marcus shifted his weight, avoiding Ethan's gaze. The silence was his answer. You knew, Ethan breathed, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over him. You knew, and you said nothing. What was I supposed to say? Marcus shot back, his guilt making him defensive. It wasn't my place. You're a grown man, Ethan. I thought it was just a fling, that you had it under control. Under control? Ethan laughed, a harsh, broken sound. I drove my pregnant wife away. Does that sound like it was under control? He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Get out. Ethan, come on. Get out, he roared, sweeping a stack of papers off his desk. The two men, who had built an empire together, stared at each other across a newly formed chasm. Marcus left, closing the door softly behind him, leaving Ethan alone with the ruins of his life. The next confrontation was inevitable. Isabel. He summoned her to his office after hours. She walked in smiling, that easy, confident smile that had once captivated him. It now made his stomach turn. "Ethan," she said, her tone intimate. "I was worried. I haven't heard from you." "It's over, Isabel," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. Her smile faltered. "What? What are you talking about? Because of your wife?" "Don't say her name," he snapped. Isabel's confusion hardened into anger. "What is wrong with you? I thought we had something real. You told me things weren't good at home. You said you felt trapped. Was that all a lie?" "Yes," he said, the admission costing him more than he could have imagined. "No, I don't know. It doesn't matter." He finally looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just a partner in his affair, but a reflection of his own selfishness. He had used her admiration, her ambition, to feed his own ego. "My wife is gone," he said, his voice cracking. "She's pregnant and she's gone because of me, because of this." Isabel stared at him, her face pale. "Pregnant?" she whispered. "Oh God, Ethan, I didn't know." A flicker of something crossed her face. Not just shock, but a hint of calculation. "You know, I always got the impression she knew about us. That you two had some kind of arrangement." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "What are you talking about?" "Just the way you talked about her," Isabel said, shrugging, trying to regain some footing. "So detached, like she was part of the business, not your life. I just assumed she had her own interests." He had done that. He had painted a picture of his wife, the woman he once adored, as a cold, distant business partner to justify his own infidelity. The depth of his self-deception was staggering. He had not only lied to Clara and Isabel, he had constructed an elaborate fantasy to shield himself from his own conscience. "Get your things," he said, his voice flat and dead. "You're fired. I'll have HR draw up a generous severance package. I never want to see you again." She opened her mouth to protest, but the look on his face, a mask of pure self-loathing, stopped her. She turned and walked out without another word. Months bled into one another. The seasons changed outside his window. Autumn's gold gave way to the brutal gray of a Chicago winter. There were no leads on Clara. She had simply ceased to exist. Ethan's obsession became his entire life. He neglected his company, letting Marcus handle the day-to-day as he pored over maps and timelines with Fleming. He visited all the places they had ever talked about going: a coastal town in Maine, a cabin in the Rockies, a quiet village in Vermont. He'd show her photo to locals, his hope dwindling with every shake of the head. He was losing weight. His expensive suits hung off his frame. The fire in his eyes had been replaced by a haunted, hollowed-out look. He had been a man who commanded rooms, who bent the world to his will. Now, he was just a ghost, searching for another. In the process, the arrogant, driven mogul began to die, and in his place, a broken, penitent man began to emerge. He wasn't just searching for Clara anymore. He was searching for the man he had been before ambition had poisoned him, hoping that if he could find that man, he might one day be worthy of her forgiveness. While Ethan's world was imploding in a cage of his own making, Clara's was quietly, painstakingly being rebuilt, 2,000 miles away. She had driven for 3 days straight, fueled by a desperate need for distance, her destination a half-remembered name from a childhood family vacation. Astoria, Oregon. A small historic port town where the Columbia River met the Pacific Ocean, a place perpetually shrouded in a gentle, cleansing mist. She found a small, weathered cottage for rent at the edge of town, overlooking the sea. It was the antithesis of her Chicago penthouse, cozy, slightly damp, and filled with the scent of salt and pine. She paid the first 3 months' rent in cash, and introduced herself to the landlord as Clara Vance. The name felt strange and freeing on her tongue. The first few weeks were about survival. She bought a cheap, used car. She found a part-time job shelving books at the local library, the quiet, ordered world of stories a balm to her fractured soul. The anonymity was a gift. Here, she was not Ethan Hayes' wife. She was just Clara, the quiet woman from the library with a sad, gentle smile. Her closest thing to a friend was Sarah, the owner of the town's main coffee shop, a bustling, warm-hearted woman who had raised 2 kids on her own. Sarah didn't ask questions. She just kept Clara's mug full of chamomile tea and occasionally left a freshly baked scone by her elbow. "Whatever you're running from," Sarah said one afternoon, wiping down the counter as Clara sketched in a notebook, "I hope you find what you're looking for here." Clara looked up, startled, but there was no judgment in Sarah's eyes, only a deep, knowing empathy. "I'm not running," Clara replied softly, more to convince herself than Sarah. "I'm starting over." She had started painting again, something she hadn't done since she'd given up her job at the art gallery to marry Ethan. She bought cheap canvases and acrylics from the local craft store. Her first paintings were chaotic storms of gray and black, raw expressions of her heartbreak and rage. But as her belly began to swell, so did the colors on her canvas. Hues of ocean blue, forest green, and the soft pink of a coastal sunrise began to appear. She was painting for 2 now. The pregnancy was her constant companion, a source of both profound love and paralyzing fear. Every kick, every flutter was a reminder of what she had gained and what she had lost. There were nights she'd lie awake, one hand on her stomach, and ache for Ethan, not the millionaire mogul, but the funny, charming man who had once made her mixtapes and read poetry to her. She mourned that man like he was dead. In a way, he was. Was her decision an act of strength or an act of cowardice? The question haunted her. She could have stayed and fought, but the thought of raising her child in a home poisoned by deceit, of watching her own love curdle into resentment, was unbearable. She had to protect her baby from that, and from the man Ethan had become. She had to give her child at least one parent who was whole. One evening, scrolling through the news on a library computer, she froze. A headline from a Chicago business journal. Hayes Corp falters as founder remains absent. Below it was a recent photo of Ethan, taken outside his office building. He looked wrecked. Gaunt, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a desperate, hunted look. A sharp, unexpected pang of pity went through her. It was a dangerous emotion. For a wild moment, she thought about reaching out, sending an anonymous email just to say she and the baby were safe. But then the baby kicked, a strong, insistent thump against her ribs, and her resolve hardened. Her first priority was no longer Ethan's well-being. It was the well-being of the little life she was carrying. Her silence was her shield, protecting the new, fragile world she had so carefully built. She closed the browser window and walked out of the library into the cool, misty air of her new home, leaving the ghost of her old life behind, trapped in the digital ether. 9 months after Clara vanished, the lead came from the most mundane of places. Fleming, the PI, called Ethan at dawn. "Got something," he said, his voice flat, betraying no excitement. "It's thin, but it's the first real thing we've had." Ethan sat up, his heart instantly hammering. "What is it?" "She used a credit card. Your wife, Clara Vance. A card under her maiden name we didn't initially have access to. It's been dormant for years, but a charge posted 2 days ago. An online purchase." "For what, a plane ticket?" Ethan asked, his mind racing. "Prenatal vitamins," Fleming said. "A specialty organic brand. And a book. What to expect when you're expecting a loan." The shipping address was to a P.O. box in Astoria, Oregon. Astoria. The name rang a faint bell. A story from Clara about a family trip when she was a girl. Of course. A place with a memory. a place he would never think to look. "I'm booking you a flight," Fleming continued. "We'll be discreet. I'll go in first, do some recon." "No?" Ethan cut him off, his voice firm with a clarity he hadn't felt in months. "Send me the address. I'm going alone." "Mr. Hayes, that's a bad idea. A confrontation could—" "There won't be a confrontation," Ethan said. "I'm not going there to bring her back. I'm going there to see if she's okay." He hung up before Fleming could argue. 2 days later, Ethan was in a rented sedan, driving down the misty, pine-lined highway towards Astoria. He felt a profound sense of dread and a fragile sliver of hope. What would he find? Would she be with someone else? Would she slam the door in his face? He deserved it if she did. The man who had left Chicago was not the man arriving in Oregon. The months of guilt and searching had stripped him of his arrogance. He didn't want to reclaim his wife. He wanted to earn a glimpse of his child. He found the town easily. It was exactly as Clara had once described it. Charming, historic, wrapped in the arms of the river and the sea. He didn't go to the P.O. box. Instead, he checked into a small, unassuming motel on the edge of town and simply waited. He walked the streets, haunted the coffee shops, his eyes scanning every face. He found her on the third day. He was standing near the waterfront, watching the sea lions bark on the docks, when he saw a woman walking along the pebbled shore. Her back was to him, but he knew that posture, the graceful line of her neck. She was wearing a simple dress, her dark hair longer now, pulled back in a loose braid. She was heavily pregnant, her hands resting protectively on the globe of her belly. It was Clara, his breath caught in his throat. He stayed hidden behind a stack of old crab pots, his heart a wild drum against his ribs. She looked peaceful. As she walked, a small smile played on her lips. It was a genuine smile, the kind he hadn't seen in years. It wasn't the polite, curated smile of a corporate wife. It was the serene smile of a woman at peace with herself. She looked healthy. She looked strong. She looked happy, and it shattered his heart all over again, but in a completely different way. All this time he had imagined her suffering, destitute, regretting her decision. But seeing her like this, he realized the truth. She hadn't run from him to a lesser life. She had run to a better one. She had saved herself. And in doing so, she had saved their child. The possessive, desperate urge to run to her, to grab her, to claim her, was gone. In its place was a profound, aching respect. He couldn't storm back into her life and tear down this piece she had built. He had to honor it. He retreated to his motel room, his mind clear for the first time. He knew what he had to do. He found a piece of plain stationery and a pen. He wrote a note, his hand steady. It was the most important negotiation of his life. He drove to the street Fleming had given him, a quiet lane of small, colorful cottages. He found hers easily. There were pots of vibrant flowers on the porch and a half-finished canvas on an easel, visible through the window. He walked up the steps, his heart in his throat, and tucked the note into the screen door. He didn't knock. He just left it there, a humble offering, and walked away. Clara found the note an hour later when she returned from her walk. Her blood ran cold when she saw the unfamiliar envelope. She opened it with trembling fingers. "Clara, I'm here. I saw you on the beach. You look beautiful and so peaceful. I promise I won't do anything you don't want me to do. I won't show up at your door. I just want to talk. Please. I know about the baby. I'm so sorry for everything. I'm at the Seabreeze Motel if you're willing." "Ethan!" She sank onto her porch swing, the note fluttering in her hand. He was here. The monster from her past, the ghost she had run from, was in her town. Her first instinct was to pack her bag and run again. But where would she go next? She couldn't run forever. She looked down at her belly. Her child deserved a father, even a broken one. And the tone of the letter. It wasn't the demanding, commanding Ethan she knew. It was hesitant, respectful. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she picked up her new, prepaid cell phone and dialed the number he'd written at the bottom of the note. They met on neutral ground. The bustling coffee shop owned by her friend, Sarah. Clara chose a corner booth, needing the wall at her back. When Ethan walked in, her breath hitched. The man in the photograph hadn't been an exaggeration. He was thinner, his face etched with lines of exhaustion, and something else. Humility. He saw her and hesitated at the door, as if waiting for permission to approach. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He slid into the booth opposite her, his hands clasped tightly on the table. He didn't seem to know what to do with them. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, with months of pain and anger. "Thank you for meeting me," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Why are you here, Ethan?" Clara asked, her own voice stronger than she expected. "I told you. I needed to know you were okay, to see you." He looked at her, his gray eyes filled with a raw, unguarded sorrow she had never seen before. "I am sorry, Clara. Those words they're not enough. I know that. What I did was unforgivable. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. The neglect. The ambition. I let my company become more important than my wife. I took you for granted. I took your love and used it as a foundation to build my ego. And I never once stopped to see if the foundation was cracking." He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't trying to win her back. He was simply confessing. It was a complete and total surrender. Tears pricked at Clara's eyes, hot and unwelcome. "You gave her my daughter's name, Ethan. You gave her the necklace." He flinched as if she'd struck him. "I know. There is no excuse. It was the cruelest, most thoughtless thing I've ever done. I was living in a fantasy, telling myself it didn't mean anything, while I was destroying the only thing that ever did." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to come back. God knows I don't deserve that. But our baby, our child, deserves to know its father. If you'll let me, I want to be a part of their life. In any way you'll allow, I'll do anything. I'll follow any rule you set." This was the moment of truth. The powerful Ethan Hayes was asking for permission, not demanding his rights. He had finally learned his lesson. He had been broken, and in breaking, he had found the part of himself she had first fallen in love with. "Her name is Lily," Clara said softly, her hand resting on her stomach. A single tear traced a path down Ethan's cheek. He nodded, unable to speak. "Lily," he repeated, the name a prayer on his lips. 3 weeks later, Lily Rose Hayes was born in the small hospital in Astoria. Ethan was there. Clara had called him from the delivery room, her decision made. He sat in a chair in the corner, silent and unobtrusive, until the moment Lily was born. When the nurse handed the tiny, screaming baby to Clara, Ethan watched, his face a mask of awe and terror and love. Clara looked at him, her heart raw and open. "Do you want to hold your daughter?" He approached the bed as if it were a holy altar. He took the swaddled bundle into his arms, his large, capable hands looking impossibly clumsy. As he looked down at Lily's face, he began to sob. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but the silent, shoulder-shaking tears of a man completely undone. The last of the millionaire mogul crumbled away, leaving only a father, holding his entire world in his arms. They didn't get back together. A wound that deep doesn't heal with a single apology. Instead, they began the slow, arduous process of building something new. Ethan bought a house in Astoria. Not a mansion, but a modest 2-bedroom craftsman bungalow a few blocks from Clara's cottage. He restructured his life. He promoted Marcus to CEO of Hayes Corp., reconciling with his old friend, and took on a less demanding role as chairman of the board. He split his time, 2 weeks in Chicago, 2 weeks in Oregon. His weeks in Oregon were devoted to Lily. He learned to change diapers, to warm bottles, to walk the floors with a colicky baby at 3 a.m. He was not a visiting father, he was a co-parent. He and Clara established a rhythm, a routine built on communication and mutual respect. They had weekly business meetings at Sarah's coffee shop to discuss Lily's schedule, her milestones, her future. Through their shared love for their daughter, they began to rediscover each other. He saw the strength and resilience in Clara he had never appreciated before. She saw a patience and tenderness in him she never thought possible. The conversations shifted from logistics about Lily to their own lives. He told her about his therapy sessions, about the work he was doing to understand the selfish drive that had almost cost him everything. She told him about her painting, how she was selling her work at a local gallery, how she was finding her own voice again. There was no grand reconciliation, no passionate kiss in the rain. Their new beginning was quieter, more profound. It happened on Lily's first birthday. They were in the backyard of Clara's cottage. The party was small, just them, Sarah, and a few other local friends. The sun was setting over the Pacific, casting a warm golden glow over the scene. Lily, wobbling on unsteady feet, took her first steps, toddling from Clara's outstretched arms into Ethan's. Ethan scooped her up, kissing her head, his eyes shining. He looked over at Clara, his gaze holding hers. In that look, she saw it all. His regret, his gratitude, his unwavering love for their child, and the quiet, hopeful love he still held for her. Later, after the guests had left and Lily was asleep inside, they stood together on the porch, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. The air was cool and smelled of the sea. "Thank you, Clara," he said softly. "For what?" "For not running again, for letting me be her father, for giving me a second chance I never deserved." She was silent for a moment. Then she reached out and took his hand. His fingers curled around hers, a familiar warmth that no longer felt like a cage, but like an anchor. "We're giving each other a second chance, Ethan," she said. "We're building something new this time, something real." He squeezed her hand. It wasn't the fiery, all-consuming passion of their youth. It was better. It was a love tempered by fire, built on the hard-won truths of forgiveness, and centered around the beautiful little girl who was, and always would be, their true north. The past was not forgotten, but it was no longer a ghost that haunted them. It was simply the long, winding road that had, against all odds, led them home. The journey of Clara and Ethan is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most beautiful lives are not the ones that are perfect, but the ones that are rebuilt from the rubble of our mistakes. It shows us that true strength isn't about never falling, but about how we rise and how we learn to forgive, not only others, but ourselves. What did you think of Clara's decision to leave? Could you forgive a betrayal like Ethan's? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more powerful stories about the complexities of life and love. The first photo loads with the faintest stutter of the hotel Wi-Fi, as if the universe is asking Marin Hale if she's sure she wants to see it. She is not. She taps anyway. There he is, Elliot Ward, collar open, palms splayed on the paparazzi flash of a black sedan, smiling with the easy grace people once called statesmanlike. And there she is, a woman with movie poster eyes and a dress that doesn't forgive, Nadia Pierce, hand resting over his heart like a claim. Marin's thumb shakes. Her other hand circles her belly, 28 weeks along, as the nurse calls her name. She thought disappearing would save the baby. She hadn't planned on becoming a ghost who could still feel jealousy burn. 3 months earlier, the lake was not yet warm enough for boats. The branches along Lake Michigan rattled like cutlery. Their house on Sheridan Road watched the water the way rich houses do, with endless glass and expensive quiet. Marin used to love the hush. Lately it felt like a performance she was failing. "I'm late," she'd said, unwrapping the pregnancy test with hands that had spent the day packaging care baskets for a domestic violence shelter on the South Side. Elliot was in his office with 3 screens, the blinking constellation of Ward Strategics holdings reflected in his glasses. His eyes lifted. "Late for what?" She smiled then, a stitch that pulled. "Not for what? Who?" A beat. Then relief. Then something else that never made sense. Calculation, maybe. "We'll talk tonight," he'd said, standing to kiss her, phone rumbling in his pocket. "This is good news, Ma. We'll make everything safe." Safe. That word would return like a tide, dragging pieces of them out to deeper water. That night she woke to find him in the hall whispering, "We'll contain it. Yes, get legal." She can't. No, she doesn't know. His voice had the softness he reserved for reporters and donors. He stepped into the cold pantry, as if secrecy preferred tile. In the morning, he was sunshine and omelettes, and let me, taking her plate, warming her tea. He talked about prenatal vitamins and expanding the nursery, then pivoted to a fundraising gala for the literacy non-profit. His attention was a spotlight. She basked, she squinted. Then the mail came, a thick envelope marked "Confidential," with her maiden name scrawled in a hand she didn't recognize. Inside, a single photograph of Marin leaving a clinic 2 years prior, when she'd thought she had cervical cancer, a false alarm, but the terror lingers, and a note clipped with a paperclip shaped like a star. "Leave before he sells you the story where your body is a PR crisis." "Who sends paperclips like stars?" she asked Elliot, dangling the note. He frowned, then went very still. "I'll handle it." "How?" she asked. "Who is he?" He hesitated long enough for fear to become shape. "Ma, there's a vote next week. If certain people wanted leverage, they'd go for you. For us, this is nothing." Nothing felt like a puddle with no bottom. That night, the security system pinged at 2:03 a.m., camera 3, the side garden. Elliot hit snooze on the alert and told her it was probably raccoons. At 2:12, the ping came again. She opened the app herself. A shape moved past the hydrangeas and lifted a phone, the blue light severing the dark. The figure looked up at the camera, then at the house, as if memorizing windows. Marin's breath snagged. She called 911. Elliot pressed her hand and told the dispatcher it was likely a false alarm. No units came. The next day he added an extra security patrol and a new NDA to her life. "Everyone signs one," he said. "It's standard." The guard, Ramon, had kind eyes. The NDA did not. That week, she learned what it is to be adored and not trusted. Every door had a code. Every phone call with her sister Elsie drew a quick, "I'll catch you later," from Elliot, as if privacy were an offense. Marin began to feel like an exhibit at a museum. Here we see the wife of a philanthropist, private creature. Do not tap the glass. The second envelope came on a Wednesday. "The doctor was wrong. You're the one who can't carry him." It included a tabloid photo of Elliot leaving a downtown restaurant with a woman whose hair flashed like copper. Nadia Pierce, actress, famously single, notoriously photographed in unintentional candor. Marin pressed her forehead to the fridge and listened to the hum. The baby flicked under her ribs. Some part of her mind passed language. Can't carry him. The baby? Elliot? The lie? When she showed Elliot, it was the first time he didn't reach for her immediately. He stared at Nadia's picture, then met Marin's eyes, as if the floor beneath them had revealed a trap door. "Nadia is a donor," he said. "We took a meeting about her foundation." "After hours?" Marin asked. "Privacy matters to some people." He exhaled slow. "They want us to stumble, Ma. If you run, they win." She didn't run. Not yet. Instead, she began to pack 2 bags. Quietly, one for logic, prenatal vitamins, cash, the tiny stuffed bear she'd bought for a future she wasn't yet sure existed, and one for grief, the sweater Elliot had always borrowed, the framed Polaroid of their first apartment where the heater clanked like a drum line, but the window let you see the city breathe. The 3rd envelope wasn't paper. It was a call from a blocked number, while Elliot did a TV hit about school lunch reform. "He has a type," a woman's voice said, bored, cigarette hushed. "Girls who apologize for taking up space. You should see how quickly he ditched the last one when she turned out complicated." "Who is this?" Marin asked, heart galloping. "The kind of friend you think you don't need," the voice said. "You have 3 days before a story drops. If you don't want your medical history dissected on morning television, disappear." Click. Marin's breath didn't return for minutes. She went upstairs and found Elliot smoothing the knot of his tie. "You okay?" "I'm going to Elsie's," she lied, and he nodded, distracted by his reflection. She left. She did not go to Elsie's. She took the back roads out of Evanston in a car that smelled like rental agency air. She drove until the homes got smaller and the gas station bathrooms weren't trying to impress anyone. She didn't have a plan, except not here. The voice had said 3 days. What does a woman build in 72 hours? A life? A lie? A cocoon? In Rockford, she parked behind a strip mall and cried into a napkin. In Madison, she bought a prepaid cell and texted Elsie, "I'm safe. Don't ask. Don't tell. If anyone calls you don't know." Elsie replied with a string of furious hearts and a single directive. "Tell me where, or I will escalate." Marin sent nothing else. She could see the news anchor already. Philanthropist's pregnant wife goes missing. Police question sister. The thing about power is it doesn't only protect those who have it, it disciplines those who don't. She found Mattingly, Wisconsin, because the motel wasn't a chain, and the neon vacancy sign stuttered like a secret. The woman who ran it wore a cardigan the color of bruised peaches, and introduced herself as Vi. On the registration card, Marin wrote Maria Hawke. The act of misspelling herself felt like stepping sideways into a world where she could survive. "You here for the fair?" Vi asked, sliding over a key on a plastic diamond. "Family," Marin said. "Surprise visit." Vi's eyebrows rose like parentheses. "Family's funny that way." The room smelled like lemon cleaner and old stories. Marin opened her bag, squeezed the bear. She thought of Elliot at home, how he microwaved tea like a sin, how he put his hand on the small of her back like an apology he wasn't sure how to say. Was she being paranoid? A coward? A mother? Outside, kids were practicing for the county festival. Lopsided floats of crepe paper and cut-out stars. Stars. The paperclip. The phone rang. The motel line. Vi's voice. "You have a visitor, Maria." Marin's stomach dropped to the carpet. She came to the office to find Ramon, the guard from the house, not in uniform, eyes raw with something too messy to bring to work. He didn't touch her, kept his hands flat on the counter. "Mrs. Hale," he said, and then, correcting, "Ms. Hawke." "How?" "I followed the trail of what a smart, scared person would do," he said. "I'm not here on Mr. Ward's orders. He thinks you're with your sister. He's—" Ramon swallowed. "They're prepping a statement. Missing person. They'll do it soft at first. If you don't return in 24 hours, they'll change the tone." "They?" Marin asked. "Legal," he said, as if naming a weather pattern. He slid a phone across the counter, face up. On the screen, a text thread he'd printed because he still didn't trust screenshots. It was between two numbers she didn't recognize. Drop the clinic file at 9. Nadia will distract. Ward walks in at 9:20. We get him on camera. Reply. And the wife? Answer. Handled. Marin didn't notice she'd sat until she was already there, the chair biting her thighs. Nadia, she said. The actress, Ramon said. She started showing up 3 months ago. Camera crews always happened to be nearby. I checked her foundation. Real charity, real work. But her manager? He's tied to an investor who's been trying to swallow Ward Strategic for 2 years. The kind of man who thinks empathy's a liability. Why are you telling me? Marin asked. You work for Elliot. I work for who needs protecting, he said simply. My sister got her medical records leaked when she tried to report a doctor for negligence. Cost her a job, a decade. When I saw the envelope with your clinic photo, I knew this wasn't gossip. It was a warning shot. He looked down, thumb worrying the edge of the counter. I came to give you choice. You can disappear better than this, or you can fight. What does fight look like when you're pregnant and every door is coded? Marin asked. Ramon inhaled like a swimmer before a long dive. It looks like choosing your witnesses, not the ones they pick for you. That night, Marin lay awake and listened to the ice machine churn. She thought of women she'd met at the shelter, the way they talked about decision as if it were a muscle you could thicken with practice. She texted Elsie the name of the motel, with the understanding that love sometimes looks like leverage. At 5 a.m., the baby kicked so hard she laughed. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She made a plan. She would see a different OB in Madison. She would put her health under her name, apart from Elliot's insurance. She would call an investigative reporter she knew from the days when she and Elliot used to think transparency was an asset. She would return when she could return safely, when the game shifted. She would build what women have always built when the world was cruel, a network of people who saw her as a person, not a headline. Then she opened her phone, and the photo of Elliot and Nadia at the sedan loaded, their bodies a script she could not read without bleeding. Madison's clinic was small enough that the waiting room chairs were mismatched, big enough that the magazines still arrived in the month they were printed. Dr. Lynn, a woman with steady hands and a voice like winter sunlight, listened without skepticism. About the envelopes, about the raccoon alarms, about the paperclip stars. You need to be calm to carry this baby, Dr. Lynn said, but you also need to feel you're not crazy. Both matter to your blood pressure. Marin wanted to fold herself into the exam table paper and disappear again. Is it crazy to think a manager and an investor could collude to weaponize my body? Dr. Lynn didn't flinch. It is believable to think people who control stories might try to control yours. They discussed practicalities, medical records, security at the clinic, a note in the file about confidentiality, a plan if anyone called pretending to be Elliot's assistant. Dr. Lynn recommended a counselor who worked with women whose partners wielded power like a scaffolding built around you, designed to hold you up and hold you in. When Marin left, the photo on her phone had sprouted a cousin, a short clip. Nadia touching Elliot's sleeve. He saying something that made her laugh, a soft throw of the head that suggested intimacy, or a good joke, or choreography. The comment section combusted. Ward's new leading lady? Power couple alert! His wife hasn't been seen in weeks. She hated how easily her thumb found the comments. She hated how easily people spoke of missing women as if they were punctuation, commas in a man's storyline. Elsie called that night, the sound of her breath a metronome of restraint. I want to come get you, she said. Say the word. I want you to eat dinner, Marin said, trying to smile. And drink water. And sleep. Don't mother me while you're on the run, Elsie snapped, then softened. Sorry, This feels like a machine you can't step in front of. I'm not stepping in front of it, Marin said. I'm taking a wrench to the back panel. Ma, Elsie whispered. A wrench sounds like hope. On day 4, the statement went out. Ward Strategic and the Ward family request privacy as they manage a private family matter. The photo outlets ran the clip of Elliot and Nadia with it, because juxtaposition is its own story. The reporter Marin trusted. Nico Vega texted, "I'm in if you are," on background until you say otherwise. Nico didn't use emojis. Marin loved him for it. She told him enough to widen his eyes, and not enough to put him in jail for contempt. He asked for documents. She gave him nothing yet. He asked for names. She gave him one. The manager, Max Klein. Nico exhaled. "Oh, you know him?" Marin asked. "Everybody knows the shadow he throws," Nico said. He had a client who was blackballed silently for turning down a producer. Bad things happen near him. No one can pin the bad to his shirt. "What about the investor?" she asked. Nico paused. "If it's who I think, he owns newspapers the way some men own hobbies." "Then how do we win?" she asked. "You pick a place where he doesn't own the floor," he said. "Local, not national. Human, not scandal. You make it about care, not about catching a man with a woman in a car." Marin pressed her palm to her belly and pictured a different kind of theatre. A church gym with folding chairs and coffee in styrofoam. A room where the story of a woman's body wasn't sexy but sacred. That night, Vi knocked on her door with a pie whose cracked top smelled like cinnamon and insistence. "Your friend is back," she said. "The one with the good eyes." Ramon sat on the curb, elbows on his knees. He didn't bring files this time, just a look that hurt. "I told him," he said, before she asked. "Not where you are, just that you're safe." He cried. Marin counted the spaces between his words. "Cried like a man who lost his favorite watch," she said. "Or cried like someone who knows he left a woman to choose between her lungs and her privacy." "Both," Ramon said, eyes on his shoes. He said he thought he could control the fire, that Nadia wasn't... He hesitated. He called it optics. Marin let the rage pass through her like a front. "That's a word for a company," she said, "not a marriage." Ramon nodded. "He asked me to give you this." He slid over a folded paper. Inside, a printed screenshot of an email chain between Elliot and legal from 2 weeks earlier. Dr. Bernstein's note. Bernstein being their first OB. "Elliot, we don't sign an NDA with my wife's doctor. We're not building a bunker. We're building a home. Legal. We will advise." Elliot again. "Your advice is noise." Marin closed her eyes. She could see him typing that. Jaw tight, the vein in his neck he hated when it showed. "It's not enough," she said. "But it matters." Ramon leaned back. "He's not clean," he said. "He's not rotten. He's a man who thought he could shape a storm with a press release." "And Nadia?" Marin asked. The actress's face floated in her mind with a glamour that was less about makeup and more about entitlement. Ramon's mouth twisted. "She started in theatre. Good girl, good work ethic, they say." Then she met Max. He builds careers by teaching people to pretend faster than their bodies can agree. Marin looked up at the motel's long strand of lights. A moth battered itself against a bulb. "I'm going to take Nico's advice," she said. "When I go back, I want to have witnesses who aren't paparazzi." She glanced at Ramon. "Will you be one?" "I don't like cameras," Ramon said softly. "But I like the idea of your child learning that a man can refuse orders." Elliot's office had soundproof walls and a view of a city that loved him like a winning team. On a Thursday evening, he let Nico in through the freight elevator. The journalist's notebook stayed in his pocket. The recorder stayed off. "I know you're dirty," Nico said, without malice. "I don't know where. Help me find a spot you're willing to wash." Elliot laughed without humor. "Do you always open like this?" "Only with men who own their press statements," Nico said. "Where is your wife?" "Safe," Elliot said. The word tasted unsatisfying now. "Not where your sources think." "Why isn't she here?" Nico asked. "Because every door in this place has a price tag," Elliot said, surprising himself. "You think you understand privacy until you can buy it, and then you realize you've purchased a performance." Nico looked at him for a long time. "Max Klein," he said. "You trying to draw him out?" "I was," Elliot said. "Now I'm trying to keep my kid from being born into a circus." He handed over an envelope. Inside, printouts of contracts, NDA templates, a schedule of informal meetings with Nadia at places where cameras like to linger, and an email from Max Klein to an investor liaison. "He'll break with the wife soon. We'll time the rollout with the acquisition chatter." A reply from the investor's man. "Warm him with access to our platforms. Make him a thought leader. He loves a panel." Nico whistled low. "They're not even shy." "Men like that think shame is for amateurs," Elliot said, leaning back. He looked older than his 41 years, the light of the glass skyline turning him into a silhouette. "Do you have kids?" "No," Nico said. "I watch other people's and try not to ruin them." Elliot rubbed his eyes. "Here's the part that won't make your story tidy. I liked Nadia. She was smart and funny and clear about her ambition. I thought, if I stand near that, it will be contagious. Not the fame, the clarity." He paused. Then the cameras started not leaving, and the envelopes started arriving, and my wife's hands shook when she poured tea, and I thought I could wrangle a narrative I should have burned. "You're saying you didn't cheat," Nico said. "I'm saying I let a woman who wasn't my wife become the audience for parts of me I should have earned back home," Elliot said. "If that's not cheating, it's the rehearsal." Nico tucked the envelope into his bag. "Your investor is 3 moves ahead," Elliot said. "He'll throw Max under a bus shaped like a gift card if he needs to. Nadia may not even know she's a piece, or she might. I can't decide which is worse." "What do you want me to do with this?" Nico asked. "Make it about power," Elliot said. "Not about me as a man who smiled near a pretty person." "You know it's going to be both," Nico said. "I know," Elliot said. "I also know my wife is going to come home when the ground is less hungry." Marin returned to Chicago, the way a diver returns to the surface, slowly, calculating pressure. She didn't go to Sheridan Road. She went to the South Side shelter first, the one where she'd coded a donation database and drilled kids on spelling, because somewhere along the way, she'd turned out to be good at both. The director, Lark, hugged her, like a sister who knew when not to ask. "He used to volunteer here himself," Lark said, pouring coffee that tasted like courage. "Before that last campaign turned him into a brand." "I don't want to be anyone's brand," Marin said. "Then be a person," Lark said. "We can build a world around that." They turned the gym into a forum, not a press conference. Nico talked her out of microphones on a riser. Folding chairs in a circle, no podium. Vi from the motel sent Pi with a note that said simply, "For when girls tell the truth." Ramon stood near the door like a lighthouse. Elsie passed out index cards for people who didn't trust their voices yet. Before the forum, Marin met with Dr. Lin's recommended counselor, a woman named Anita, whose office had a rug like a coral reef and a jar of peppermints that looked like tiny planets. "I want to go back," Marin said, "but not to the house we had." "You want to go forward?" Anita said. "Home is sometimes a verb." At the shelter, when they opened the doors, the room filled with women and men who knew exactly how stories get made and unmade. a teacher who'd had her divorce papers printed by a gossip site, a paralegal who'd watched a partner destroy a junior associate with rumors, a teenage girl in a hoodie who just wanted to know how to print a restraining order request without her aunt seeing the browser history. And yes, a few reporters, including Nico. Marin spoke without notes. She didn't name the investor. She named behaviors. "A man convinced me that the air was safer inside his fences," she said. "He wasn't a monster. He was practiced at control posing as care, practiced at assuming my privacy was a bargaining chip that could be tucked into the pocket of a deal and returned later. Maybe, if it matched the suit." She put a hand on her belly and felt the baby roll, a wave under the skin. "I left because I want my child to learn that safety isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of people who won't sell your silence." When she finished, she wasn't sure she'd made a dent in anything but herself. Then the teacher stood, then the paralegal, then the teenager, who simply said, "I'm not going home tonight." And Lark squeezed her shoulder and said, "We'll help you figure out a different sentence for tomorrow." Nico spoke last, not as a reporter, but as a citizen. "When we run this," he said, "we'll frame it as a community conversation about power and privacy. If the tabloids want to run stills of a man and a woman near a car, they can. We'll put your words against the machine and let the city decide which sound it prefers." After the forum, Elliot waited outside under a hackberry tree that shed its tiny berries like confetti if you jostled it. He looked wrong there. Too crisp, too broadcast. He held a bag with her favorite ginger cookies from a bakery that spelled everything with unnecessary vowels. He didn't approach until Elsie nodded once. Ramon crossed his arms and watched the street. "Marin," Elliot said. The sound of her name in his chest reached her like a song she used to listen to when the dishes needed doing and the window was open. "I won't touch you unless you ask." She nodded, appreciating the sentence construction. "You made a mess," she said calmly. "Yes," he said. "I practiced a mess and called it strategy." "Nadia," she asked. "A person," he said. "Not an enemy. Not my future." "Max?" she asked. "A server of fires," he said. "I've been feeding him dry wood with my attention." "And the investor?" Elliot looked at the shelter door. "A man who thinks truth is a commodity. I'm going to make him regret that thesis." Marin considered. "You'll lose money," she said. "Maybe the company." "Yes," he said. "I'd like to keep our kid." His voice cracked on our, and she almost forgave him for a sentence. "You don't get to keep me," she said gently. "You might earn me." He closed his eyes like a man who'd just been handed a prescription that would heal him slowly. "I'll show up where you are," he said. Not with cameras, with groceries. It was an unglamorous promise. It glowed anyway. Nico's story ran in the Sunday edition of the local paper that still put ink on hands. The headline was not a tabloid scream. "When privacy is a currency, a community weighs the cost." Inside, alongside Marin's forum, were small, careful boxes. What HIPAA really covers. How to request your medical records. What to do if you suspect a leak. It was, in the way good journalism can be, both infuriating and useful. Meanwhile, the investor's media properties ran a different headline. "Ward's wife stirs drama, actress unbothered." And there was Nadia, walking into a studio with a coffee and a speed that said, "Please let me be late to something important." Marin felt the pull to hate her. Anita suggested instead that she locate the person who had learned to take speed as love. Back in the city, Elliot called a board meeting and did the thing everyone tells rich men never to do. He confessed. He said he'd let attention distort his calibration. He'd listened to flattery as if it were policy. He'd prioritized optics over oxygen. He didn't weep. He didn't brand it. He said, "I'm sorry," like a hinge that had rusted and still opened. The board loved the part where he blamed himself. It let them not have to change. Then Nico published the contracts, the NDA templates labeled domestic proximity, the emails where Max promised access to doubling Ward's Q score. The investor's man saying, "We can make him clean to the audience that matters." The state attorney general requested a conversation with several parties. The hospital where Dr. Bernstein worked announced a review of patient privacy protocols. Nurses wrote op-eds about how they are not the leak. The investor denied everything and threatened to sue. Max vanished to a rehab that specializes in men who have lost their way in the fog of talent management. Nadia's publicist issued a statement about her client's commitment to uplifting women's stories. It read like a mirror that had learned to talk. In the middle of that weather, Marin went into early labor. It happened on a Tuesday when Vi's pie had just left the oven, and Elsie was crying at a commercial where a man fixed a porch swing. The pain was not the stabbing she'd expected, but a full-body shiver followed by a clamp. Dr. Lynn's calm voice over the phone. "Go now. I'll meet you there." Elliot drove like a man who'd been given 8 minutes to prove his usefulness. In the hospital parking lot, he stopped, hands white on the wheel. "May I come?" he asked. He looked terrified of the wrong answer and committed to hearing it. "Yes," Marin said. "If you can be here as a person, not as a plan." "I can make coffee," he said. He could. He did. Labor collapsed time into a wet red tunnel in which a woman might scream or pray or remake herself into someone who can hold pain without letting it break her. Marin did all three. Elsie held one hand. Vi held the other. Ramon sat in the hall like a stone that had decided to spend the afternoon being useful. Nico sent a text that simply said, "Here if needed." In the end, the baby came with hair like a rumor and a cry like a reprimand to the world. They named him Jonah because he arrived in a storm, and because of the way the name tasted. Round, a place to land. Elliot wept, not like a press conference, but like a man whose body had lost the power to curate. After, in the quiet, cracked only by machines whispering numbers, he stood by the window and said the thing that finally felt like a bridge. "I want to learn how to be the father of a child who will someday ask what we did when people tried to buy his mother's story." "Then," Marin said, eyes on Jonah's face, "you will tell him we turned the microphones toward the community and away from the car." Jonah's first week tasted like peaches and antiseptic. The city, having decided that babies are more interesting than men in suits, let the story soften around the edges. Elliot stepped down as CEO with a letter that named no enemies and made no excuses. He listed the names of mentors he'd ignored when they warned him that power makes you deaf. He named the shelter as the recipient of a foundation grant. He named Nico as the journalist, whose work reminded me that accountability is less a gotcha than a garden. The investor sued the paper. It backfired loudly. In Discovery, emails surfaced that tethered him to IT firms known for data enhancement. A nurse from Bernstein's clinic came forward through a lawyer, detailing a side channel where non-medical staff were paid to flag celebrity-adjacent patients. The hospital fired people and then did something rare. They apologized in a sentence that didn't include "if." Max resurfaced to film himself walking into a meeting with a reckoning expert, a spectacle so perfectly performative it almost made Marin pity him. Nadia reached out through Vi, of all people. The actress had come to the shelter quietly, wearing a hat like a disguise and a mouth like she'd recently stopped eating. "I didn't know," she said in a small office with a whiteboard that still had last week's meal planning scribbled on it. And then I knew, and I told myself that knowing is not the same as participating. which was cowardice in a dress. Marin looked at her and saw a woman who'd been trained to make an entrance at the expense of exits. "What do you want?" she asked, not unkindly. "I want to use my voice for something that isn't my face," Nadia said. The sentence made them both laugh. "I want to say sorry, not as a press release, as a practice. I can sell a story," she added. "Maybe I can sell one where a man is not the center." "You can amplify one," Marin said. "We don't need to be sold." Nadia nodded, cheeks pink with unpracticed humility. "Teach me how to not make it about me." They started small. Nadia funded a project at the shelter where girls learned media literacy, the difference between attention and care, the choreography of images, the meaning of opt-out as a full sentence. She used her Instagram to send followers to the paper's community resource boxes, not to her own statements. She didn't attend galas. She showed up for cleanup days. She brought coffee and left before the photos. In their second counseling session, Anita told Marin and Elliot, "Redemption is not a confession with a bow. It's ribs you grow back with boredom. It's the grocery list he promised." Elliot had been bringing groceries. He continued to. They were learning to argue in real time, not via press strategies. They were learning that trust is not a feeling you wait for. It's a practice you do. One night, when Jonah's sleep stretched into a miracle, Marin asked, "What was the first lie you told yourself?" Elliot didn't pause. "That I could be in a room with a woman who made me feel new and not owe my wife an explanation for wanting to feel that way." He looked at her straight on. "What about you?" Marin swallowed. "That if I could just be smaller, quieter, the world would stop trying to take from me." They sat with that. Then they ate cereal on the couch while the lake did its endless breathing. Months unspooled, the investor settled lawsuits with checks that never corrected the moral ledger. Max wrote a book with the word "humbled" in the title. The hospital changed its patient intake procedures and hired Dr. Lin to help build a privacy protocol that treated women as sovereign. Nico's story got shortlisted for an award, and he didn't go to the ceremony. He was at the shelter teaching kids how to verify sources. Elliot took a job that made less money and more sense. Chief of staff to a public school network director who didn't care about his speaking voice so much as his ability to make scheduling software behave. He was not photographed for 6 blissful months. When he was, it was because Jonah drooled onto his tie at a library event, and someone's grandma thought it was adorable. Marin, who had always built quietly, built louder. A non-profit spun up at the shelter called Whistle, a hub for women navigating privacy violations with maps, sample letters, calm people who could sit with you while you called a hospital supervisor. Nadia and Elsie sat on the board. Vote managed volunteers with a ferocity that made teenagers stand up straighter. Ramon ran training on personal security that didn't assume people could afford locks that tweet. On their first anniversary after the storm, Elliot asked if he could come home. He had, practically speaking, been home in shifts, couches, guest rooms, the nursery floor at 3 a.m. But the word home deserved ceremony. They wrote vows for a second time that weren't vows so much as job descriptions. Hers, "I will tell you when I feel small. I will not wait for you to guess." His, "I will treat your privacy like a room I am invited into, not a space I own." Both. "We will turn toward each other before we turn toward the crowd." They married again in the shelter's gym, because why pretend a hotel ballroom means anything to people who have lived in rooms where truth is the decor? Lark cried into the sheet cake. Nico didn't take notes. The teenager in the hoodie, now interning at Whistle, made a toast to adults doing it messy and better. Later, when the lake exhaled cool through the open doors, Nadia took Marin's hand. "I used to think the most romantic image was a man in a tux on a skyline balcony," she said. "Now I think it's a grocery list on a fridge." Marin laughed. "Don't tell the magazines. Let them chase the balcony," Nadia said. "We've got shelves to stock." A year after Jonah was born, a different kind of envelope arrived in the mail at the shelter, thick with glossy paper. It was a magazine issue dedicated to power couples of the Midwest, the kind of facile glitter Elliot once used to think he needed. He put it in the recycle bin. Marin fished it out and cut it into shapes with Jonah on her lap. They made stars. They used a glue stick to fix them to the wall near the office door. Ramon passed, pointed, smiled. "Upgrades. Protection," Marin said. Anita would say recovery is thousands of small, boring decisions to hold on to what matters. And then, sometimes, a glorious one. When a grant came through that allowed Whistle to open a second office on the west side, Marin stood with a pair of scissors and realized only one person could cut the ribbon. She handed the scissors to the teenage intern. "I'm not the face of this," she said. "I'm the flaw." Elliot taught Jonah to say please and to ask before posting photos. He taught himself how to sit with an emotion for 20 minutes without contacting a person who would make it disappear. He apologized. Publicly, yes, but more importantly, privately, with his phone off. When Max's book came out, Nadia posted a photo of Whistle's resource board and captioned it, "Some men write apologies. Some women build them." Then she deleted the app for a month and didn't miss it. The investor spoke at a conference about resilience and never said the word sorry. It didn't matter. Fewer people were listening. On a Tuesday, not special, not dramatic, Marin and Elliot stopped at the grocery store for eggs and dish soap. At the register, a woman behind them with a toddler on her hip looked at Marin and said, as if commenting on the weather, "That forum you did, it made me ask my boss for doors that lock." She shrugged. He said yes. Marin felt that sentence land somewhere sacred. "Good," she said. "That's good." They walked home along the lake. The water had learned their names. The house on Sheridan Road still had its glass and its hush, but now the quiet felt like a room where you could take your shoes off and tell the truth. On the fridge, a list. Milk, eggs, toilet paper. Call Dr. Lin about Jonah's rash. Pie from Vi if we're lucky. Underneath it, a paper star. Marin took Elliot's hand. "Okay," she said. The same word she'd said in the motel, in the hospital, under the hackberry tree. It was ordinary, and it was everything. They went inside. "If you stayed with Marin and Elliot to the end, thank you. Stories like theirs aren't fairy tales. They're messy, hopeful maps of how ordinary people decide to love each other and themselves in a world that tries to buy the script. If this resonated, if you've ever had to rebuild trust, reclaim your privacy, or learn that redemption can be as unglamorous as a grocery list, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment with what part hit home, share this with a friend who might need it, and subscribe for more slow-burn, emotionally rich dramas about power, love, and the truths that change everything. Your support helps us keep making stories that feel real and worth your time.